Hello once again and welcome to the Fair Game podcast, We Love You Football. I'm Graham Miller, and in this episode we're taking a look back at what's happened to the game during the past year of 2025. It's certainly been one to remember. England's women retained their European crown in Switzerland. Crystal Palace stunned everyone to win the FA Cup. Liverpool claimed their 20th league title, and fans enjoyed free goal highlights across a variety of platforms like never before. Off the pitch, the Independent Football Regulator finally took charge, while the Fair Game Index revealed the stark, bleak truth about club finances. So let's take a look at some of these stories with my guests. First, we have Kelly Simmons, a key figure in the development of women's football in England. She was director of the women's professional game at the FA, shaping the progress of the WSL, and she's now a sports consultant and director at Women in Football. We will be joined later on in the podcast by Dave Kitson, best known for his prolific spell at Reading, which helped them reach the Premier League. He later played for Stoke, Portsmouth, Middlesbrough, Sheffield United and Oxford United. He moved into management and coaching, taking charge of Maidenhead United Women this year, and he now runs his own coaching business. As usual, also is here Niall Couper, the CEO of Fair Game, who can now add another year to his personal campaign to keep the lower leagues alive. Kelly, let's start with you. What's your best memory of 2025 from a footballing point of view? And I have a feeling it might be a certain game in Switzerland last July.
I think it has to be. I was there in the stadium, lucky enough to be there as a guest of UEFA. To see England win back-to-back Euros, it was a dream come true, an incredible performance, I think, through the whole tournament. There was just absolute guts and resilience. They just didn't know when they were beaten. They were most of the time down in the tournament looking like they're going out and found a way to win, which, they've got the best manager in the world in Serena. The players really came together. Hannah Hampton, a lot of pressure on her, I think, before the tournament started because of Mary Earps dropping out the squad, and a lot of focus on her. I thought she was outstanding and, has gone on to win a number of awards, and rightly so. But I think, it wasn't for the faint-hearted, was it? I think as England fans, it was, and very un-English to win the penalty shootout as well. But I think to be the first England team to win back-to-back major tournaments and to win on foreign soil, I think, that has to be an incredibly special moment in the history of football, never mind women's football.
You mentioned Hannah Hampton, and also Chloe Kelly as well, another one who's on the among the contenders for the BBC Sports Personality of the Year. As we record, we don't know who's going to win, but that really is another feather in the cap, isn't it, for women's football?
It is, yeah. I mean, I can remember sort of growing up, and you never hardly saw any women on being nominated, never mind footballers. And Lionesses seem to sort of dominated the last few years and have got to be in with a very, very good chance. I'm sure Ellie Kildunn will pick up a number of votes as well in rugby, because she had a fantastic tournament, and England obviously went on to be world champions, and led by her incredible performances. But I think, I wouldn't be surprised if Hannah Hampton doesn't edge it.
Right, okay, we'll hold you to that. Has the women's game now sort of finally established itself, do you think? I mean, have we got over that barrier?
I think we've got over the cultural barrier. I think it's in the mainstream. I think everybody knows it's there and either follows it or can follow it. I think it's moved on dramatically. That all said, there's a huge amount of work to do. I've just been doing, in my day job, a sort of deep dive review globally of the women's professional game across the world for clients. And most of the leagues, a lot of the top leagues still are sitting in the federation. They've got very, very small staffing structures, very limited budgets to invest, very, very low media and commercial rights, and are sort of, grappling to build what is effectively a startup business, and are at very, very early stages. So the job isn't done, but in terms of, I think, sort of breaking through into the mainstream, showing that girls and women can do anything, can be professional footballers, the whole visibility piece, particularly led by the Lionesses, but the success of the WSL as well, it's unrecognisable.
Absolutely. Now, Niall, the Football Governance Act was passed in July as well. Was that the moment for you?
Yeah, I'm a footy fan as well. So I'm a Wimbledon fan, and we won the playoffs. So therefore that kind of does tick it a little bit. I didn't get into Box Park after the game, so I was a little bit disappointed by that. But it was pretty cool. But that's because the whole story of Wimbledon is one that echoes what and a lot what fair game is all about, and trying to get the trying to beat the odds and trying to be something better from what football can be. So to me, that was a moment. I do the moment that the Act passed the last session in the House of Lords was also memorable. And I sat through many a session. I might have been the only one in the gallery, following it line by line, trying to make sure that the right things were said, getting hugely frustrated by certain Tory backbenchers talking for Britain and stuff like that. And I know people got frustrated that we were putting amendments down, but it was because we saw it as this has to be right and we have to get the right things in. So things like ED&I came back in, things like commitment with community engagement and social engagement came back in, and then crucially the link between the state of the game report and the distribution deal, all that came back in, and those were really important things. So yeah, that was massively important. And it's weird, I had a hug with the sports minister and the culture secretary and the leader in the House of Lords after
Did you say
after the session, after the final one, that final bit. I was there until whatever, and then I came down and it was like, a little bit of a special moment. I mean, these three inspiring women that really led football change, and it was great to be there with them. And they knew that what we've been doing with Fair Game was always on the side of that. We were being a bit picky on what we wanted, but it was their determination that really led it, and obviously started with Tracy Crouch. So huge achievement, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. And hats off to all those quartet. In terms of the other highlight, Gillett, I mean, is there nothing better than walking in a park and seeing girls now trying to do the Chloe Kelly penalty kick? I mean that for me, still. I mean, we have to remember she missed one, right? I mean, I know she got the rebound, but she did miss one. But that was great, and I just thought, if there's a person to do it, then she was it, and it was. And then even the story of Hannah Hampton. I mean, it's a person who can't see properly, right? Effectively, can't judge distances, and you're a goalkeeper. I mean, it's like if there's one position on the pitch that you're supposed to, you need all those elements, and it's like, what a hero, what an absolute hero. And I've got two girls, and I absolutely adore the fact that in my lifetime I have seen participation by women and girls in sport generally, football particularly, absolutely boom. And I think it's brilliant. And it's like one of those things that really we could grasp as a nation and take it on. I mean, we're world champions and we're European in rugby, we're European champions in football. Hats off to the women. This 2025, the year of women in Britain, really. I mean, like I've just said, four women basically responsible for the revolution in the men's game, and a women's team doing phenomenal in the European Championships. I actually don't think they were necessarily the best team in terms of skill, but in terms of a team, and a manager, they were amazing. And then I'll admit to being a tiny bit of a rugby fan, and the kind of tries that Ellie scored are like you just don't do that. You just don't do that. You don't just pick the ball up from your own half and go, "Oh, hold on, I'm just going to score a try now. I might be like a million miles away, and there might be 10 defenders in front of me. I'm just going to score." And she's got that mindset. It's just what an inspiration for women this year. I mean, absolutely, completely phenomenal. So it's great. And also, I got to speak to Kelly at a conference. So, what more do you want?
We've got the FIFA Women's Champions Cup next month, Kelly. Arsenal in the final stages. It's looking good, isn't it?
It is looking good. I find this fascinating because those who are global fans of women's football have been having a debate for a number of years about which is the best league. Is it the NWSL in the USA or is it the WSL? And how strong is Europe versus America as Europe's caught up as the games opened up to women and clubs have started investing? And of course, it looks like it will be an Arsenal Gotham final. And I was in San Jose to watch Gotham win the playoff and win the NWSL recently. And I think it'll be a really tough game. The only thing for Gotham is, of course, they're out of season because they start their season in March and play through to November. But I'm sure that they'll be training hard, preparing, and ready for London. So yeah, I think it's fascinating, and of course, it's sort of a lead into the Club World Cup coming in 2028 for women's football, which is massive. because it's a platform that the game and the club game needs in the women's game to really show the best of it, and showcase and make stars of the club game. So yeah, exciting. We're looking forward to January in London.
And also in April, you mentioned the World Cup. England take on Spain again at Wembley. Well, that's a cracker, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's a big rivalry, isn't there? And the matches are always close fought. And I was in Sydney when we lost the World Cup final to Spain, and it was heartbreaking because I felt like we should have and could have won that day, but not to be. And then obviously we got revenge in the Euros. So yeah, we always seem to get them, don't we, in the groups? And it'll be another, yeah, it'll be a sellout, I'm sure, at Wembley. And yeah, a tough game. I mean, Spain.
Niall, I mentioned briefly the Football Governance Act a moment or two ago. Earlier this month, in December, the owners, directors and senior executives regime was given a sort of set of teeth by the new regulator. Are you happy with this sort of start of the future, as it were? Are things looking in the right direction as far as you're concerned?
Do you know, the big pause because kind of yes and kind of no. It's like, I mean, those who know me know that like the idea of me resting on fair games laurels and kind of saying like fair games done its bit um, is kind of against my whole mentality. And what has happened with the owners and directors and senior executives? Why do they call it so long? The title anyway. That
Doesn't trip off the
regime.
tongue, does it?
And also the licensing regime is that it's a bit like a semi missed opportunity at the moment because there is stuff that needs to be strengthened, and we were always going to be a critical friend of the regulator, and it needs to be better than it's been put forward at the moment. Doesn't quite do it, and so we're working with that. But what has been interesting over the last, I mean, this is 5 years now, is that the organisations that believe football can be better, so that there are certain clubs, there are supporters groups, there are people like Women in Football who, Kelly knows like the Fair Game team is a really good friend, and people now are working with Kick It Out and Level Playing Field and Show Racing Red Card, Football Future, a whole range of football organisations, and we're all kind of starting to come together and seeing football as an opportunity for changing the world generally, really, but definitely the game. And that strength means that when you get a test like the owners and directors test, and when you get the licensing regime, we're all starting to work together, Graham, and we're all starting to see that this is an opportunity to like really use what is a fantastic community asset, which is our national game, and make it like vibrant and really full of energy. I mean, I mentioned the whole what we've seen with girls and women playing football. That's a community thing, right? And there is a real sense that if we use that, then it can be brilliant. And I'm always going to strive for brilliant. So at the moment, yeah, where I'm at with the regulator, it sort of started with a C minus, and I'm kind of saying like, go and do your homework, go and lock yourself in a room, read some of the literature, talk to a few people, kind of get it better. We all know you've got the ability, you've got the structures in place to get yourself that nice A star, but you've got to start working and listening and realize that have a vision, be something different. So I think, it can be, there's a lot that can be done. And Graham, I'm a kind of, Fair Game's becoming this football think tank, and we want to try and develop all these realistic solutions. So that's where we're at, and it's an exciting journey. There's a lot happening, and the problem is that it will never be perfect, and because it will never be perfect, people like me and Kelly won't ever really rest because we're kind of a bit mad like that. But that's the challenge, isn't it? That's the challenge. I think Kelly would probably agree with that. Whenever I've met Kelly, I've come away with that exact thing. He'd go like, you've done an awful lot, Kelly, but I can't imagine Kelly going, "Oh, I'll just sit down and have a nice cup of tea, put my feet up and chill," because it can always be better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I think, obviously from a women in football point of view, we would like to have seen tougher sort of standards around ED&I. And you look, it's a real opportunity, I think, to have modern, diverse governance in our football clubs, which would stop some of this groupthink and would really elevate the women's game as well with my women's football hat on, because most of the boards are all male and focus on men's football 99.9% of the time. And you've got a women's game trying to sort of grow within that, and clubs sitting on the women's football club asset and not really doing anything with it when there's lots of investors wanting to come in. So I think I wrote an article, I did write an article in The Guardian saying after the Euro win, now is the time to either step up or step out. And there's plenty of investors that are prepared to come in and help invest and really elevate the women's game. But, the worst thing that you can do is just sort of sit on it. And too much of that's happening. And I know that the challenges when I was running the WSL of the culture of some of those clubs and the women's team trying to sort of reverse engineer itself into 100 years of plus of men's football and a very sort of male culture, it has been really tough. So I think it was a real opportunity to transform the diversity of boards and leadership, and make them reflect our communities and reflect the game as it is now. And I fear that that isn't happening in a way that it could, and I think that's a massive missed opportunity.
I'm pleased to say that Dave Kitson's now joined us on the podcast. Hi, Dave. Hope you're well. When I was doing the introductions, and we've been reflecting on the success of the women's game, both at club and national level, you've been coaching Maidenhead ladies. Was there some sort of reflected glory and reflected success from the national side when you were coaching them?
Nothing that was tangible to us. I mean, just to give you the context, we play at Tier 4, which it would obviously be an equivalent. I mean, I'm loath to give the equivalent. It should stand alone, but it doesn't at the moment for all sorts of reasons. It's that would be the equivalent of League Two in the men's game. So we don't pay our players, and as such, we are susceptible to the vultures from above pinching our players, which is I just caught a bit of what Kelly said there, and it's true to say that the women's game is growing leaps and bounds, but it's making so many mistakes, and I see them on a daily basis. Nobody can fault the heart of the players. Nobody can fault the determination. Don't let anybody tell you that they don't care as much as the men. It's not true. But there are always issues in something that is sprinting before it's learned to walk, and that's what's happening at the moment for us. But in terms of the success of the England women's team, yeah, it's great. We watched the final together. It was brilliant. We loved every second of it. We got some great videos of us all leaping around and jumping when the winning penalty went in. But did we see any benefit from it at our level? No.
You mentioned sprinting before walking, as it were. What needs to be done then?
Well, there's a rule that's just come in recently that it's now mandatory to pay players at certain levels, which is I don't necessarily agree with. I think that's an error. We're at the mercy of the 7-day rule, which, for those who don't know what the 7-day rule is, the 7-day rule, if you don't contract your players, you don't pay your players, you are at the mercy of any other club coming in and pinching your players, that they can make an approach, which is called a 7-day approach. And you have 7 days to work out what you're going to do with the player. Are you going to offer them a contract, or are you going to allow them to speak to this other club? The knock-on effect of that is that you will lose your players for nothing. So and it literally is this harsh. I can find a player, I can recruit a player, a local player at Maidenhead. I can put her on the pitch, and she could play a game. She could play 1 minute of that game. And if somebody else likes what they see, that I could lose them to a WSL team overnight, and it's wrong. It's always been something I've railed against. It exists in the men's game and the amateur game. We could change it if we desperately wanted to, but there's not really an appetite at the moment with everything else that's happening and all the good news stories from the WSL and the England team.
Interesting. Putting that to one side at the moment. Apart from the physicality, are there differences between coaching a women's team and a men's team?
There's a difference between coaching a professional team and an amateur team, for sure. The best advice I had was David, whatever you think of the men's game, leave it over there and come in and take it on its merits. There's always context at play. The context at play is that Maidenhead is a semi-professional club. The women's team is completely amateur. It's pegged to the men's to the football club, but it operates as a separate business, which again is something that I would rather it didn't. But that's not my decision, and there are reasons for why that happens. We would like more training time, I guess. In terms of, if you're asking me to be crude and say, are there differences in the men's and women's game in terms of how they play? Yeah, there's a few differences, but it's not anything that can't be overcome. You take the game on its merits and you coach what you see before you, and you build a culture, and it's like anything else. It's a bit like when people come to me and say, oh, you don't see all this diving in rugby. It's a different game. There's no point in comparing. We can learn. I would much rather learn from the mistakes that have been made in the men's game and make sure we don't repeat them in the women's game. That's what I'm interested in.
Niall, David's touched on finances there for clubs at all levels. Looking back to the Fair Game Index for last year, for 25, or this year, coming to the end of it, it assessed the 92 league clubs across more than, 22,000 data points, both revealing and concerning at the same time.
I mean, it is concerning. I mean, we're in a financial situation where like two examples. Millwall are considered to be among the best, most well-run clubs in the Championship. They lose £10 million a year. AFC Wimbledon, my team, lose £600,000 a year in League One, and that is pretty much the lowest amount that any club loses in that league. And that's a fan-run club with no benefactor. And those two clubs are often held up as like the examples of how you're supposed to run a football club. Right. And what other business is happy at losing 10 million or £600,000 a year? And that's what we kind of found. And it's like there's a whole cultural shift. And this is where I kind of look at the regulator and think, but there's a chance here to try and change that shift, to try and look at how you alter that mentality. We're in the middle of a ridiculously massive project, looking at all the different elements of it and trying to work out exactly how that can work. We're making really good progress on it, but Graham, it's bleak and it's getting worse. So, I mean, it's led to a whole load of things. I mean, and this is kind of the reason why, I know Dave, right, is because of what happened at Reading and what's happened at Sheffield Wednesday and all this sort of stuff. And you get all these kind of disaster stories, and it's because football's a bit of a mess when it comes to at that level of, there's nothing in the rules or in the kind of governance structures to say, well done for being financially sustainable. You've done really well. Congratulations, you've not lost any money. And, there's nothing like that. It does not reward or encourage clubs to be well run financially. And that's a big risk, because one club might have a big sugar daddy, means another club that doesn't has to spend massively to try and compete with the big sugar daddy, and they haven't got it. So structurally, there's big questions to be asked, and so that's what the Fair Game Index really found across the 22,000 data points. I mean, we've just also released another report out yesterday that for the first time, I think it was no brainer for a lot of people, that clubs that are financially stable are ones that invest in their community and have really strong links to their community. They're the ones that can survive the ups and the downs much more than other clubs that don't. So there is a financial benefit of being sensible and being community led and all the rest of it. And that's where I think, if we can move towards that culture, that's good longer term. And what I think about what we were talking about the women's game, and I think Dave's argument is really strong on like sprinting before you can run, or even like walk. There are mistakes littered all over the men's game, and the women's game can learn a lot from them. I mean, there's significant problems that are unique to the women's game, and like endemic sexism being the number one. But there are other issues that I really hope the women's game doesn't repeat and learns from. But that's all kind of things we learn from the Fair Game Index and from the work and the research that we're doing. But again, there's a glimmer of hope here, Graham, that wasn't there before. There is a chance, right? That door is slightly ajar, and it's been shut for years. And people like me and Kelly and Dave knows through that like people at Reading. It's up to us to kick that door wide open. And I'm busy lacing up my boots.
Kelly, is the women's game learning from all of this, or is it just simply make it harder to find sponsorships and financial backing?
I understand. I think Dave's point is around WSL2 and mandatory contact time of players to make them professional. I'm going to defend WSL football here for a minute, because I think at the end of the day, there was a decision made that the top two tiers would be part of professional women's football. And at the moment sort of comprise in total of 24 teams. I suppose there's a question about how much professional women's football, how many clubs can be sort of viable and on that path to professional women's football. It's not going to be the same numbers as men's, that sort of goes all the way through the system and into non-league. But ultimately, if you don't invest up front in the product, and I've worked with a lot of professional women's leagues now across the world, and those who are a hybrid of semi-pro and pro are being held back by the quality and the range of quality between top and bottom. And it's very hard to persuade broadcasters to get behind what is, this sort of hybrid and varying quality. So they've made this decision, sort of bold decision to say, no, if you're going to play in the top second tier and being part of professional women's football, then it needs to be fully professional. And we start with the quality of the product. So I think there's an argument for it. I appreciate not everybody will agree with it, but I think there's a sort of strong argument that you've got to get the product right. If you don't get the product right, then you're not going to build the business around it. But I think that, of course, people are looking at the history of men's game, trying to learn lessons, but there is a sort of there's a bit of a sort of cut and paste of men's football about women's football as well. We've got one of this, so the women should have it type thing. And I'm not sure that in many leagues and competitions across the world, it's probably structured in the most optimal way to make it thrive. There's an FA Cup, so we have an FA Cup. There's a League Cup, so we have a League Cup. There's, and you just sort of copy it and fill the calendar, and is that the best way to really try and drive this sort of startup? Not so sure all the time, but I think people are trying desperately. People involved in the game are massively passionate about it and trying to steer it the right path for it.
Are there any new initiatives then that you feel should be brought in to overcome these problems?
That's a big question. I think there's so much. I think we've already sort of touched on the fact that some clubs are sitting on the women's game and not really either investing in it or allowing investors in. So the game at the top levels particularly needs investment, both on and off pitch. Most of the clubs, they're very, very sort of pitifully small marketing budgets, very limited focus in building the business off pitch, and then wondering why it's operating at losses. Arsenal are a proof point. I know that's Arsenal and it's a huge, big global brand, but they're a proof point that you can build a business in women's football and a viable women's football club. And there are other examples across the world and in England, but that takes investment and leadership, and that's not happening everywhere. So I think there's just a lot to do, I think, around start treating the women's game, if you like, as a startup and really helping, really investing to make it a great quality product, and investing in a pitch to build that fan base and attendances and revenues, and it can be done, but everybody needs to step up together, and that's not happening at the moment.
Indeed. I mean, Dave, Niall's already mentioned Reading, your former club, of course, have had a challenging year off the pitch. How worried were you about them during 2025 as we look back over the past year?
Well, worried, as any fan would be. not to be selfish about it, but you do football. I struggle with football in terms of, when you turn around to your kids and say, I built that. So I sound like Keir Starmer here. So my dad was a carpenter. You can see the things that he was a builder, a carpenter. You can see the things that he built. It's tangible, it's real. People are living in those things that he built. I look at my career and think, what is it really? What is it? And it's only when something like this happens, you realize what it is. You realize actually how important it is to people. They were actually marching, thousands of people, marching through the street up to the stadium, and you kind of think, oh, okay, I get it now. And it's sad that should be the case, that when this happens, there's so much anger around football when things don't go well. If you take Manchester United, for example, right, one of the biggest clubs in the world, things haven't gone very well for them. There's so much anger, there's so many column inches, so much content produced on people being angry about it. But if it's suddenly announced tomorrow, it's going to the wall, all of that emotion flips, and people come out and rail against the owners of the situation and try to put it right because it means something to them. And I had a very sort of tangible awakening, if you like, without being soppy about it. And I did get a bit emotional about it on the march because it was that close. It really was that close. And you're talking about a club 1871. It's how can that be? It's just absolutely mind-boggling that we could be in a situation where that happens. And just to move it on again, is that my anxiety with the women's game, when I talk about sprinting before we can walk, the first thing that went at Reading was the women's team. It was the first thing that went. Didn't even think twice. Now, I did my coaching badges with the women's team. That was the team that had Jade Moore and Mary Earps and a phenomenal team. Great guys. They used to take the mickey out of me mercilessly during that week, being an old has-been and all that. And I went out and trained with them, and that was the first time I'd actually been on a pitch with the girls, and I was thinking, wow, the standard is amazing. I had no idea some of them would go on and do as well as they did for England and win trophies. Had no reference point. And I began to care about it very much. And so just to give you another snapshot, because we're a couple of years down the line now at Reading and things look a lot better, thankfully. But I note Blackburn, for example. Blackburn, I signed a goalkeeper from Wolves, and but she wasn't playing, and I signed her, and she became our number one. Great girl, really focused, all the attributes. And then Blackburn went under. Blackburn's women's team went under. They signed Wolves' number one goalkeeper. Wolves signed Blackburn's number one goalkeeper. And so she didn't have a club, so we signed her. And after 4 games, I lost her to Queen's Park Rangers for nothing. Queen's Park Rangers, who had taken my goalkeeper the year before, who had just gone to Watford, and sent them a very nice email about maybe looking at coaching some goalkeepers in West London. But then I looked to see how she got on in her first game and noted that they'd signed a goalkeeper the day before and she was on the bench. So here was this girl who was having a great season with us, who now suddenly was just sat on the bench because they needed a reserve goalkeeper. And the knock-on effect is absolutely these ripples that you get in the game, and you can trace one thing to another. And that's what I'm talking about. If that bit's not right, the knock-on effect to the individual and the fan is absolutely massive. And we really, really need to guard against that, because we're in this mindset, whether we like it or not, that if things go wrong and you have a women's team, it will go. That will be the first thing that goes, and that can't be right.
That's why women's football should have been part of the Independent
Football
100%. Regulator for me.
100%.
I mean, it just, of the most vulnerable is the women's teams.
Yeah.
And they are the ones that need protection more than anything. They should have a slice of the solidarity funds because they were blocked and banned for so long. They should be protected through a club license with certain minimum standards. It doesn't mean paying all the players and things like that where there isn't money, but I mean certain minimum standards of care and welfare and medical provision and some of the horror stories we've seen.
Yeah,
And there should be fairer and more diverse representation at the top of these clubs that are men's and women's football clubs. And there's just nothing, there's just nothing there that's going to protect in terms of the Independent Football Regulator women's football. It's out of scope, and I just think, a massive missed opportunity. I've sort of made my points a number of times in the Guardian. I just think it's completely wrong, and you've just given a couple of great examples where the women's football club needed to be protected, and wasn't, and there's nothing that can be done to hold those clubs to account on it.
yeah,
Right, just
absolutely.
picking up on that bit about what happens at Reading and other clubs, and it's completely right. The women's team is one of the first things that goes. And I think a lot of people forget when you're not part of that club or part of that ecosystem about what happens when a club goes into financial difficulty. Because the first thing, I mean, yes, it's the women's team, then it's the community programs, then it's the backroom staff, then it's stadium maintenance and fan engagement. The last thing that goes is like, some of the stuff on the pitch, but there's a whole load of things. Or like when a club goes into administration, it's all those local businesses that go out of business, right? So it is not some sort of harmless thing where because we got used to it that we kind of dismiss it. But actually, if you're part of that, like the reason why there were thousands of people marking at Reading, why you've seen the big protests at Sheffield Wednesday is because of all of these, how much it matters and how important it is. And I think that is one of the big bits that people miss. And then I want to just touch back on where Kelly was talking about with the women's game and the regulator. And I think there's a need for the regulator, or a need for a women regulator of the women's game. There are some big fundamental issues that are different between the women's and the men's games, and I go back to endemic sexism. I think is really important. So I think it needs to be regulated. When it comes to diversity within clubs and within backroom staff and within all of that, there is a lot of research or merchandise, right? There's a lot of research that says that if a football club doesn't look at its ED&I and how it reaches out to wider elements of the community and women in particular, it is really missing out. It's not having that kind of right. There's a big benefit about having a gender balance and a policy that looks at properly looking at gender issues within whole areas of this game. And we're doing loads of it, and we've done loads of that out there game. And the regulator has this ability to look at the game, and that has to look at community involvement, right? So that's a part of it, its remit now. But it also has to look at financial sustainability of a football club. And that's one of its number one remits. So where we argue is that you need to look at rewarding clubs that do correct things in terms of gender diversity because it's got a financial sustainability benefit. And that's really clear. So, if you're championing financial sustainability, then you also need to be incentivizing and encouraging clubs to be more diverse and being more thinking outside the box. And that means your leadership roles need to think about where you have that gender balance, where you do have all these other elements, and they are so fundamentally important. And making that argument really strongly is one of the things that Fair Game and talking to great people at Women in Football and some other groups, it comes into the bit. So I think it can be within scope because that door's open, Kelly.
Yeah.
Because that link is like it has to be financial sustainability. There is a link to the distribution deal that the regulator will have oversight of, and if those two things are connectable, and it's about making that argument very clearly that it just makes sense. It should be a complete no-brainer to every single football club. And it's about making sure that argument is articulated because it will help, right? It doesn't hinder, it helps. So it's like, why not do it is the argument. So Kelly, this is the bit where I think that, this is why, I was one of those very sad individuals that actually read line by line through the entire bit, worked with a lot of legal people and looked at where the opportunities are. And that's one that was really keen. And I spoke to a lot about what needs to happen is it needs to make sure that it was vague enough to say, right, well, actually, if you're doing this, this is what you need to do. We didn't want to see it ruled out. That was the key, to make sure that it wasn't ruled out, because once it wasn't ruled out, then it's in. And that's where we see the benefit. So I'm still an optimist, Kelly. I still see
No, I
the
like it. It's good.
possibilities. it will take a battle, and it will take a fight, and it will take making sure people come together and think, right, let's do this because we can.
Kelly,
So
let's jump on that. As I say, we're a few weeks away from Christmas. Let's look forward to 2026. Identify the priorities then. What would you like to see? You've got a blank piece of paper. How do you like things to improve in the coming year?
Look, we just chatted about the Independent Football Regulator, and there are some opportunities for the women still, I think, or that will benefit the women's game around governance and leadership. So let's hope that sort of, this is the start of an opportunity that there's a greater diversity and more representation around the women's section of the club in the senior leadership of those clubs. I'd like to see, particularly professional game clubs, more of them step up and invest on and off the pitch. I think you've got a massive variation still between top and bottom because you've got those investing and those driving the business, and those where you put it on the TV and it's empty stadium and the quality of the product is okay, but there's a big gap. So I think I'd like to see the more of the club step up really and treat it as a startup business and invest in it, set out a really clear strategy for its longer term viability and work towards that, rather than just seeing it as something we have to put a bit of cash into, but we're not really treating it as a business, and we're not really invested in making it viable and work. So I've probably got a very long list if I thought about it.
Dave, we've shared your frustrations. Looking ahead, what are you looking forward to?
So I'm looking forward to the women's game growing. We at Maidenhead we have to be a bit smarter about how we recruit. We can't just approach a club and bid for them and give them waive a contract and sign them. It doesn't work like that. So we're doing some really exciting things around recruitment. We've introduced data analysis, which has been incredible, actually. I was not because I'm a dinosaur, I understand the benefits of it, but I wasn't sure how it would work in a part-time environment. And it's been amazing. It's revolutionized how we look at training, how we look at games. So just growing what we're doing and protecting what we have. So we have, because we don't give out contracts, we have something called PCPs, which are player career pathways. So for our young girls, the deal is we will offer you a best in class coaching, is our promise, and we will. If the club from the tiers above come in for you and you want to go, we will drive you there, but we are going to shout about it because we want the mums and we have performance teams at Maidenhead for our 10s, 11s, and 12s, girls and boys, and so we really need to shout about listen, this player has gone right through the system and into the first team, and now's gone off and is having a career, and wouldn't you like your daughter or your son to come in and be a part of that? So that's something that we're building. We changed the training times for the girls team so that they train before the women's team kick off, so they stay and watch the women's game, and they're getting autographs, they're getting selfies, and they love it. And then it's just it's incredible. My blue sky thing, I'm going to chuck this in just to mix it up a little bit. Here's my blue sky, and this, I'm not sure if this makes it better or not. But 20-minute half times in the men's game, the extra revenue that creates, I want to see trickle down to the lower leagues. The extra broadcasting revenue, somebody like Daniel Levy at the stadium would have been all over that if he was still at Tottenham. And regionalise Leagues 1 and Leagues 2 to cut down on travel and save some money and be a bit greener.
All good points to me. Now, last question to you. Do you feel overall the game is in a better place in December 25 than it was in December 24?
Yeah, I do actually. I think it is, because that opportunity, the chance for change is there that it never was before. I feel that I've got to go through my moments, what I'm looking for 2026. Apart from the idea of having an extra pie because of Dave's 20-minute half times, which will do no good for my weight.
Think of where that money's trickling down to, Niall. Do it for the greater good.
Yeah, think of the money.
All right,
Niall.
I'll have an extra pie just for you, Dave. And their pies are good at ploughing. So for me, right, there's a whole range of things. From a fair game perspective, we want to be that hub of football for good. We really want to be that bit where we bring all those organisations together and really push it forward and bring everybody together and try and make a collective difference. And we've got our conference, and that should be a big moment for that. So I'm really looking forward to that, and that should be great. On the regulator, start being brave, guys. Start thinking about what can be. Don't start thinking about what was. Think about what can be. Have a new vision. Be visionary. I think there's real hope and there's a real appetite for it. Don't be scared. That would be my big thing for them. I'm a Wimbledon fan. Can we stay up, please? Turn the form around. It'd be quite nice. I'd like to get that. I'd like to have me centre forward back fit. That'd be good. And there's a certain thing called the World Cup coming up. Yeah, I'd love England to do it. The only thing is, if England did win the World Cup, can Donald Trump not be involved in the ceremony? That's it. I'd just like that not to happen. That would be really nice. I don't know. I don't know who's the mayor of New York now, whatever. Anybody but Donald Trump. Taylor Swift, somebody, just not Donald Trump. That's it. Can he just be banned from the closing ceremony? That would be my big wish from the World Cup. I don't want Donald Trump anywhere near it. It's a spectator, actually, or Infantino. That's a problem. But
that's more optimistic than my 20-minute half times now. I don't think that's going to happen, to be honest with you. Someone's going to lift it.
Yeah. We don't want the mayor of New York.
Maybe if we've got Donald Trump eating your pies at half time, that could be the solution.
If we're on Christmas list, can I have 3:00 Saturday for women's football, please, for a TV slot? Because we haven't a regular appointment to view, and the 12:00 on Sunday looks like it's struggling audience-wise. And that's because they're trying to fit in something around a very full men's football.
God, I think we could come up with loads of little things like that, Kelly. We've got your 3:00.
If you could wrap that up, somebody, and send that to
20 minutes.
Football, that would be lovely.
That's it. I've always wanted apple crumble sold at football grounds. It's not happened. I keep on lobbying my team, saying we've got pies, we have curries and pies and all that sort of stuff. Where's me pudding? I want a proper pudding stalls at football clubs. Can we get that in? I'll be well happy.
On that note, listen, Kelly, Dave and Niall, thank you so much for your time, and I wish you and all our listeners season's greetings. If you've enjoyed the podcast, do please subscribe to the Fair Game podcast. You can find it on all the usual channels. I'm Graham Miller, the producer is Ian Beach. Thank you for listening, and until the next edition of We Love You Football, it's goodbye for now.